Hi, this is Ann Stoneson of Beginning Counselor, Building Your Ideal Internship. And today I want to speak with you about owning your internship interviews. 3 preparation must-haves and 3 blunders to avoid. So this is for you if you are a counselor in training preparing for a clinical internship or for some job interviews. If you're feeling anxious or a bit out of practice with the job interview process, or depending on where you are in life's journey, perhaps you haven't really done many interviews before, this is for you. And then, of course, if you're an overachiever and just want to review every last option you have to make a good impression, this is also a good resource for you to have. So starting with our must-haves. Interview prep must-have number 1. I want you to climb into your interviewer's head. And what I mean by that is it's really common when we go in for interviews to be thinking about what we want. We want to know, how much are we getting paid? What are the kinds of clients we're going to see? How many appointments are we expected to keep every week? Is it a standard 8 to 5 job, or do I flex my hours? Those are the sorts of things that we're wondering about and curious about. What do I get paid time off? What are the benefits like? So it's very natural to be thinking about your needs and your questions, but I'd like for you actually to take some time to really try and climb into your interviewer's head and think about, what do they need? What are they looking for in an applicant? And in order to do this, you're going to have to do your research. So you'll want to get the lay of the land as far as the agency or practice that you're applying to work with. You'll want to, if they've got a mission statement, to look at that. You'll really want to review the job description in detail. Maybe you know somebody who works there, in which case you should be taking them out for coffee to kind of pick their brain about their experiences. So really do your research. It's going to make it easier for you to showcase your skill set and how that dovetails with the interviewer's or department's needs than if you're just going in blind. Another way to think about this little acronym, WIIFM, it stands for What's in it for me? And while this is usually terminology used in marketing lingo, it's a really good thing to consider when you're working with clients who are coming in for a consultation, if they haven't decided to work with you yet. What's in it for me? How can you help me? Do you get me and what I need? The same can be said for interviewers, future employers. So think about it from their perspective. What's in it for them? What do they need that you can do? Interview prep must-have number 2, enthusiasm and a couple of good questions. So usually when you go into interviews, you're prepared to, answer questions, and you're trying to, compose thoughtful responses to maybe some of the most common questions that you get asked in an interview. Like that difficult question, tell me about your 3 greatest weaknesses, and you're trying to think, okay, how can I frame these as strengths? I'd like for you to really be honest with yourself about this position that you're applying for, and can you feel enthusiastic about it? There may be parts of it that maybe aren't a fit or you're not as excited about, but people can tell if you feel enthusiasm for a role versus if you're just looking for a job. And I know that can be hard, where if your bottom line is you need to get a job and you need employment, and maybe you're just trying to look for whatever you can. Sometimes we're in that situation. That's just the matter of things. But perhaps there's something particular about this job that you can feel excited about, even if it's, I've been out of the field for a while and I'm looking forward to getting back to working with people and working with clients. Maybe it's something as simple as that. But whatever it is that you need to do, you need to have your enthusiasm as a touchstone, because people can tell if you're excited about an opportunity or if you're not. And as for having a couple of good questions, this just shows again that you've done your homework, like tip number 1. You want to have some questions for the interviewer, and you want them to not be questions necessarily like, so how much does this job pay again? Or, so when can I take my first vacation? It's natural you're curious about that, and I'm not saying that's off the table for discussion, but you want to have some questions that show that you've really thought about the position. So you want something that can't be answered by the website. And it might be something as simple as, can you tell me a bit about your ideal candidate for this role and why those qualities make that candidate ideal for you? So again, it's another way of, you want to get the interviewers to talk a little bit about themselves or about the role, and to show that you can listen and really absorb that. And then hopefully, as they're giving you an answer, you can provide some information about, oh, well, as it turns out, what you're looking for, I da 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 da. So interview prep must have number 2, be in touch with your enthusiasm and have a couple of good questions. So when they say at the end, do you have any questions for me? You say, yes, actually, thanks for asking, and have at least a couple you can roll out. An interview prep must have number 3. This is not specific to doing clinical work or, clinical internship, but I think that sometimes it still can get overlooked, and it's a really nice touch. And that's just to say thanks after the interview. You can do this a couple ways. You can do a handwritten note, you can do an email, you could do a phone call. I think it's nice if you send something or do something that doesn't require a response or any work on the part of the interviewer. So you really want it to be something that you're giving without expecting to get back. Because interviewers, they may have a lot of people that they're in touch with about a role. And while that's, I know, anxiety provoking to think about, again, WIIFM, what's in it for them? You don't want to think about, okay, well, let me go ahead and ask them, how they thought I did, or, when I could expect to hear from them. It's natural to want to know that. Usually they'll volunteer that information, or maybe you can ask at the very end of the interview. But following up and requesting that they work, by returning a phone call, you really want it to be something simple as, here's a card with a pretty picture on front, and me offering my heartfelt thanks for our time together. So make it a one-way communication where you don't have any expectation of a response, because that's a nice thing to do with somebody who's really busy, is to not give them more work. So shifting to blunders, which I have made, I'm sure, these at various points. So some things to avoid. Interview blunder number 1, desperation or faking enthusiasm. And like I was saying earlier, I know that sometimes we're applying for jobs and we're not super excited about them. There may be, depending on our circumstances, we may be really desperate for a job. I respect that. It's not an ideal position, but it's one we often find ourselves in. And so I guess what I would say is, what can you do to handle your anxiety, right? What can you do to handle that desperation so you're not bringing it into the room with you? Because that feeling is not going to help with the interview process, and it's just going to make you feel more preoccupied, more nervous, and less able to show all that you know. So whether that's guided visualizations or meditation or talking about it in therapy, having a supportive friend you can vent to, whatever it is, try and take the edge off of that before you go into interview as much as you can. Because desperation, again, that's the opposite of WIIFM, right? What's in it for me? Where you're thinking about what's in it for you, and oh my gosh, I really need this job. And the other piece is faking enthusiasm, which, as I was talking about earlier, again, if it's a job you're not super excited about, I know that can be hard. It's like, well, what do you do? And that's where, if you find yourself applying for jobs that are completely out of alignment with your values, that's something to look at, because that really gets down to your integrity, and it really becomes a question of, well, how long could you do this work for if you're really, really not only not excited, but dreading the job that you're trying to get? So that's a complicated issue, and one that I have not enough time to get into in our talk today, but I really just want you to think about these matters of hanging on to your integrity and how to handle your anxiety so that you don't come across as desperate or as fake. Because again, interviewers, I think, can pick up on that if it isn't heartfelt. So even if you can just find that one piece of the job that you're excited about, like getting back to work with clients, hanging on to that, that's something that is authentic and real that you can bring into the room. That's important. Interview blunder number 2, ignoring your gut. I want you, after the interview, to notice your impressions and make notes about it right away. Um, and something that I can do that maybe is a problem for you too is letting your left brain talk over your gut, right? So by left brain, I mean left mode processes, the language part of our brain, the part that's really plugged into the more logical, right, um, matters. It can be easy to talk yourself into or out of something, ignoring that felt sense, that wisdom in your body of, something about this doesn't seem right, even if it looks really good on paper. And your left brain can tell a story of, oh, well, this is why it actually is okay. Don't worry about it. You could lose a really valuable piece of information if you just let your left mode processes hold sway. So notice your gut, notice what you're feeling, notice your impressions, and take time to hold space for it immediately after the interview if you can, to capture that data before it goes away. Interview blunder number 3, cookie cutters. A real common blunder is having a cookie cutter approach. And this is true both for when you're interviewing as well as when you are putting together application materials. And even though that's outside the scope of our talk, I'll just say here briefly, I think tailoring your cover letter and your application materials for each and every job you apply to is really an important way of setting yourself apart and of showing that you're not just applying to dozens of jobs, even if in fact you are applying to dozens of jobs, that taking that extra time, even though it's very work intensive, is very important. And the same thing is true for your interviews. So avoiding cookie cutter statements, general, comments about the job or about you, like really trying to be thoughtful and specific so that when the interviewer leaves and is trying to remember you from 5 other people, that they can think of at least a couple things that you said that stand out to them, as opposed to just, you know, things that are true, but kind of they're like cookie cutters. They're just kind of from one to the next. It's the same sort of stuff. I really enjoy working with clients. I'm really passionate about this work. You know, th- while those things may be true, they don't really help you stand out. So avoiding cookie cutters, aim for a close fit, know ahead of time what you're going to say about your skill set and how it dovetails with the job and the needs of the clients at this particular agency or practice. And again, that comes back to doing your homework. So, this is a complicated topic, as you can probably tell, because I've mentioned a number of times that situation we find ourselves in when we might be applying for jobs that we're not 100% excited about, or even 50% excited about. And what do we do in those situations? And how can we feel encouraged? And how can we sustain our progress and momentum in those cases? And in that case, I want you to consider joining us at beginningcounselor.com, because we have resources in a community that's built to support you with questions like these. So if you're worried about some of those interview questions, what sort of salary are you looking for? Have you ever worked in an inpatient setting like ours and you haven't? Or that 3 biggest weaknesses question. Beginningcounselor.com is designed for you to support you in this very important process of internship. So I hope this has been helpful to you. Thank you so much for taking the time, and best of luck with those interviews. This is Ann Stoneson, a beginning counselor, building your ideal internship. Have a lovely day.